Hello, everyone. My name is Norez Rana, and I'm an economist with the World Bank. I'll be hosting today's program on New Wave, in which actually I'll be introducing a new series on the political economy of Pakistan, in which we'll be discussing and covering a host of different issues related to governance, service delivery, microeconomic problems that Pakistan tends to grapple with, and how all these different various problems tend to impact the greater macroeconomic landscape of Pakistan. And accompanying me on this series, I would like to introduce a very special guest. His name is Harun Khwaja, who's been a key figure in the policy landscape of Pakistan over the course of his years. Mr. Harun has served as the advisor to the Prime Minister of Pakistan and also as an advisor to the Chief Minister of Pakistan. He is the patron of the All Pakistan Business Forum and is the president of the Maverick Foundation. Thank you so much, Harun Saab, for joining us and being part of a journey as we commence this new series on Pakistan's political economy.
Thank you.
So before I turn to you, I just want to set the overall stage of today's discussion. Today, we'll be looking at a broader, holistic diagnosis of Pakistan's problem and what the country is grappling with. Over the last decade or even more so, we've been spiraling downwards. But if we look at the indicators of the last 2 years, I would say they're more than horrendous. There was a time in 2023 when our foreign reserves went as down to $3.1 billion. That only covers worth 2 weeks of imports. The USD PKR currency parity transcended 300 rupees the very first time in its history. Our GDP contracted to 0.6%, again, very alarming figures. And there was a time period not so long ago when we were actually flirting with the prospect of default. And in all, while these are macroeconomic figures, it highlights the fact that how gravely the population and the common man has been suffering. So I want to turn to you now and have your thoughts and as to why do you think that in the last couple of years and more recently, we've really got ourselves in such a huge mix of problems, and our economic indicators, no matter which one you pick up, is in a very dire stage.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Norez. Pleasure to be here in your new program. So it's this question has a very long answer, and I'll try to summarize it. Perhaps it may help if we look at the past performance of the economy of Pakistan. So quickly, I got some numbers for you. Remember in 1947 where we started off, right? So this part of Pakistan, which was West Pakistan at that time, we're about 40 million people. And August 1947, almost 1 million people died in communal violence. 10 million refugees were crossing the border. The bulk of British infrastructure after the partition was primarily in the Indian part of the subcontinent. As you know, the British started in the 1700s and 1800s from the eastern side of the subcontinent.
Yeah.
The east side developed before the center and the west. So Calcutta, for example, was a very modern city. The capital was in New Delhi. So this part, which is today's Pakistan, was relatively less developed. So that's where we started. There was a very kind of a small army, which was headed by a British general. There was no air force, there was no navy, there was no bureaucracy. There were no dams, there were no canals, there was no agriculture, there was no industry, there were no roads, there was no infrastructure, there was no electricity. There were just a few power plants, coal-based power plants that the British left.
So we were hardly a functioning state.
Yeah, and if you read the books, the leaders of India would be talking on the top of their voice, saying that they'll kneel down in front of us to take them back. So that's where we started. So let me set the tone. Okay, that's where we started. So for people who say, Pakistan is not doing well and Pakistan has no future and things like that, I want them to understand where we started. And I'll just give you a few numbers of where we are today, right? So this is where we stand. From 40 million people, today we are 250 million people, the fifth largest country in the world. Okay, by population. The GDP was about $6-7 billion in 1947. Today we're at $400 billion. The per capita income was $164. Today we're at $16.50. The installed capacity that we have today of electricity is 40,000 megawatts. And it includes broad-based sources like coal, nuclear, wind, gas, so you name it, we have it, solar, right? A network of highways and motorways that is connecting the country and the region, perhaps the best in the region. We have private enterprise that has thrived. We have factories, we have private airlines, we have private banks, we have private insurance companies, we have private services, consultancies, IT, you name it. It's a thriving private sector, right? And last but not least, a formidable army, a formidable air force, a fast-growing modern navy, a nuclear state, a state which is militarily among the top 10 in the world. That's where we are today. It's not bad, right?
I mean, from how you describe it, I think then we should not be grappling with the problems that we actually are grappling with at the moment.
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to change the question, right? The question is that Pakistan has, obviously, the numbers that I've shared with you, Pakistan has tremendously progressed. But the question is, has Pakistan progressed to its potential? Right? So I think if we put that in perspective, well, the answer obviously clearly is no, because the potential of Pakistan is way more than what it has already done, which in my opinion is commendable. I mean, there is 192 countries in the world plus some territories. And, you compare them to, you take out about 50, which are, either developed or, top of the developing countries list. There's 140 countries in this world which are nowhere. So you compare that, the performance of Pakistan, it's commendable. Yes, the potential is amazing, it's incredible, and we can continue to talk about that. I think that's where your question comes in, that what happened in the 2 years, right?
And actually, I do have another question that'll come in later, but we'll talk about who's actually reaping the dividends of all that we've achieved. Because I think there's a lot of disparity there as well. While we've achieved a lot, like you said, we've prospered, but it's only a handful of people. But yeah, I leave that discussion to later for now.
Right. And I'd be glad to answer that as well. So coming to your question, that what happened in the past 2 or 3 years, clearly, the biggest issue that we are facing in the past 2.5 years, and that broadly answers that potential question also, is the lack of right leadership, the lack of representation, the lack of participation of people's will. Until and unless you do not have a representative government that is leading the people, you do not have the power of the people. And if you do not have the power of the people, there is no way you can present yourself as a strong government with a direction that the people want.
Right. And
so
go ahead. When do you feel was the last time that we were in a situation when the government was truly, rightly, legitimately elected by the people and had the autonomy to do what it wanted to? Because I mean, we look at the indicators of the last 2 years, they've been falling pretty badly and very at an accelerated pace. But I think everything has been in the works for quite some time, like the last decade or even before that, since Pakistan has been going and falling downwards in comparison to other of its regional peers. We look at the growth of India, we look at the growth of China, and we look, post the 1990s. I think everything has been brewing in a manner that now we are facing the repercussions. So it's not just the last 2 years. Isn't this a problem that we've been facing for quite a while?
Absolutely. And the biggest issue is consistency. So let me share some numbers with you. So starting from, I tried to bifurcate Pakistan into 6 decades, right? Starting from 1961. So let's take the 60s. Our average growth rate was 7.25%, right? Then it was the 70s, 4.72%. 80s, 6.3%. 90s, 3.97%. And the 2000s, 4.44%. 2010s, 3.68%. And now the current one is we're hovering around 3.78%.
Mm.
So to summarize, the best growth was 1960s, 7.25%. What happened? Well, it was a non-representative government. It was a military regime, but the best ever decade, right? Which is called Decade of Development. Why? Well, CENTO, foreign assistance dollars coming in, and perhaps deployed on projects and areas that that made sense. You know, their agriculture developed a lot, dams. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff that happened, good stuff that happened. But again, you know, there was no consistency. It could not continue, could not sustain, because the country was formed through the ballot box, through the vote, 1946. Right? And it is in the DNA of the country, people's representation. So that's why it was never able to sustain. Now, the second best was the 80s, 6.3%. Again, non-representative government, military government, well, Afghan war, so dollars coming in, all support, all sorts of support from the rest of the world. And we use those, you know, to, I guess, get to the nuclear capability.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Yeah.
The third best was the 2000s.
2000s.
4.4. Again, war on terror, non-representative government, military regime. So, you know, the best times have been non-representative, but, you know, it was all, it was not organic.
Exactly. There were external factors. So is it okay to deduce that we've never really established or developed self-reliant capabilities? That somehow there's always been an external factor that has contributed to our periods of growth spurt.
Yeah, these three, certainly, the ones that the three military regimes definitely were supported from external countries. But the point is that whenever the democratic dispensation came in, it did not perform well, but that was not a good enough reason to just throw them out and stop people's representation. The point is you have to continue, you have to sustain it so that people learn how to elect or remove governments. The people have not been given a chance to do that, you know?
Absolutely, yes. Democracy is a self-correcting mechanism over the years, you know, it improved itself, yes.
If you want it to improve, if you want it to sustain, you have to give it a chance. And it's not a matter of 4 years, 5 years, or 10 years. It's a matter of decades. You have to let your people experience it and then learn what is the power of vote. Over here, you know, we just go along with democracy for 10 years and then we decide, oh, actually, you know, it's not a good idea because politicians are corrupt and they're incompetent and the country is not going in the direction that it should be. Whereas I just told you from 1947, when you compare, we've done extraordinarily well.
Right. So basically what in essence, what we assume and expect of democracy is that eventually people will become aware enough, sorry, excuse me. So people will become aware enough that they will, that will enable them to elect the right people who have the right ability, the capability to lead the country forward. We've never actually gotten to that stage and it's always been hindered. And therefore that is the biggest hurdle or obstacle to Pakistan's growth and development in par with its potential, like you said.
Absolutely. You can bring the best of the people from the whole best of Pakistanis and put them in the government. They'll do their best. They'll perform wonderfully well. but they will not be able to sustain it because there is no connection with the people. So you have to establish that connection. And I think, the good thing is that over the past seven and a half decades, the youth bulge now, over 70% of the people are 30 plus years, under 30 years of age. So, and with the social media revolution, and people are so educated now in terms of politics, in terms of what they should be expecting, in terms of what's right, what's wrong. I think there is an organic kind of learning and growth within our people, and I think there is a great realization that people, I think, have the ability now or the understanding to elect the right people, and if they don't perform, to throw them out.
Perfect. And I definitely hear you, and I agree with the fact that obviously that it is the very fundamental of development, and development comes through freedom, and that's what we study. And freedom is not just freedom in choice, but the freedom from hunger, freedom from lack of opportunity, freedom from unconsciousness, and freedom from lack of awareness and knowledge, and that all comes through a democratic process that you need to endorse, accept, and adopt.
That's why we formed Pakistan Freedom Movement.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that, and inshallah, hopefully it'll evolve into a national level, nationally driving instrument that can bring about change in Pakistan. So now, just the last 10 years, since actually we've had a form of democratic government. I mean, it's questionable, but we've had democratic government since 2008, since the Pakistan People's Party came into power, and then 2012-13, it was a PMLN. So just the last 10 years, last 12 years now, 2012 to 2024, when PMLN came to power, our external debt was $61 billion. And today our external debt is around $130 billion. And if you throw public debt into the mix, our internal debt, into the mix, our total debt stands at $234 billion. That's almost 76% of the GDP. So our debt has almost doubled over the last 10 years, and it has all happened under the enforcement and the monitoring of democratically elected governments. At least let's assume that they are democratically elected governments. And the reason why this accumulation of debt is associated to Pakistan's big challenges is that now we have to, obviously, a lot of even as per our budget, a lot of funds that we derive and we extract, most of it goes towards debt reservicing, interest repayments, and it crowds out investment from things which actually matters, things that help grow the human capital of the country, investment in education, health, in climate change mitigation and resilience and whatnot. The reason being, from what I understand, is that Pakistan has always been an import-oriented economy. And another factor that I want to add to what your analysis is that China opened up in 1978, India opened up in 1992. And up until that point, Pakistan was doing fairly well regionally. But then the world drastically changed. It became an open economy globally. And when it transforms that way, the global environment, you either become, someone who capitalize on their export potential, like India and China did, or you turn into, you get yourself in a rut, the way Pakistan got themselves into. They started importing, and they were unable to develop those productive capabilities. How do you think we will be able to address this huge issue of debt now? Do we have enough time? How will we realize stability in the short to medium term? Because it'll take some time for us to get to a point where we can start exporting goods to the world in a manner that India or countries like China do.
Well, again, just to give you some background, I know you're talking about the last 10 years, but I want to also take you back to the 1990s, and specifically the Protection of Economic Reforms Act of 1992. So this was an act that was passed in 92. Pakistan was a very closed economy. Foreign exchange was very tightly controlled. But in 1992, a democratic dispensation brought this act, Protection of Economic Reforms Act, which basically opened up the economy, and you could trade in dollars and You could carry dollars freely. There were different instruments. You can send dollars out. You could have brought dollars in, no questions asked. So if you look at the trajectory since then, again, this decade was the second worst in Pakistan's history.
Absolutely, yeah.
So without getting into details of what happened, because I want to come to your question of the last 10 years. Again, democratic dispensation, but the decade of the 2010s was the worst ever, 3.68% GDP growth. And in 2010, something very substantial happened in Pakistan. People don't realize it. Now, I was actually part of the government at that time, and another amendment came in, which is called the 18th Amendment in 2010, April 2010. Yeah. And 18th Amendment basically changed Pakistan. The Pakistan of pre-April 2010 was a different country compared to post-April 2010. Well, what happened? 18th Amendment is essentially a very good idea. The idea is that, power should be devolved. It should be given to the people. The centralized role of the government should finish. So therefore, the federal government agreed to give certain ministries, or most of the ministries, and funds, and power, meaning police. They devolved to the provinces. The next step was that the provinces were supposed to devolve it to the local governments. Guess what happened? Our local Democrats, when they started receiving the checks from the federal government, they were like mesmerized. They never had that kind of money. And the provinces grew so powerful that they started challenging. You would hear very often, province just says, hey, go figure it. I don't agree to what you're saying. So it's a great idea, 18th Amendment, but extremely badly executed. The first step should have been, before the amendment, first step should have been creation of more provinces. The second step should have been the creation of meaningful local governments. Remember when I say meaningful?
Yeah.
I mean that you need to devolve finance and power. Power means police. You need to devolve finance and police to the local authorities.
Local government.
This is a local government issue. This is not to be controlled by the provinces or the federation. Police is a local issue. It's a concept called neighborhood watch. When you're sitting in your house, you will never want someone, who's selling drugs or doing, unnecessary kind of things that you wouldn't want someone in your neighborhood. You wouldn't want those kind of people around. Everyone wants their neighborhood to be nice and clean. That's the neighborhood watch concept. So you cannot expect a policeman who belongs to Quetta, who comes and gets deputed in Faisalabad, to be bothered about, what's happening in Faisalabad. But if the person is from Faisalabad, there is a certain affinity that person has from the place of birth. So it's a global concept. This is what happens everywhere in every civilized country in the world. So, and finance means you've got to give the power of taxation to these governments, local governments, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In addition to
absolutely. That's one issue we'll cover in another episode, but less like lack of taxation and our ability that our GDP to taxation is less than 10%. Again, we'll talk about it, but itself, it helps address that problem as well. The presence of local governments.
Right. So to answer your question, so what happened in the past decade is that the Federation basically gave away 57% of what it earns through taxes to the provinces. The provinces feel great. They just love to spend. They imagine that, if there is a middle-class person who works all his life to send his son to study in the United States in a good university in Australia or UK, right? And the son is studying over there. And, he goes to the college, and once the college finishes, he goes to the casino.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts burning the money over there. Then he calls his dad, "Hey, Dad, I need more money." And, the dad goes and starts selling his furniture, starts, mortgaging his house, and continues to send money to the son. And the son is just continuing to spend.
Wasting it away,
Very
yes.
easy to spend. This is what's happening. So the Federation has become that dad who's now mortgaging everything to finance the sons, who are the provinces. And the provinces don't care. They just continue to spend, right? So, as I said, this all happened after the 18th Amendment. Now, what should have happened was there should have been, so the Federation is continuing to acquire debt, and all the resources that it should have to repay the debt, it gives to the provinces.
Yes.
So and the provinces do not have any link to the debt that the Federation is acquiring. So either you've got to connect the provinces, then whatever money that the provinces get should be after deduction of the debt servicing.
Exactly, yes.
Somehow it needed to be tied up, which it didn't. And that's why the federal government has continued to broke now.
Yeah, so basically the Federation tends to keep on leaking its funds and, devolving them to the provinces, but it has no mechanism, or there's no instrument for it to retrieve it or to ensure that provinces contribute towards the debt repayment pool. And therefore, over the years, we've accumulated. So I don't think this problem is going away anytime soon. So how do you think, again, I mean, we may be treading away from our main core topic at the moment, but do you think there's a solution to it? I don't want to get into a solution. We'll probably cover it in another episode, but do you think there's a solution to it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, debt management is a very normal subject. People who are in economics, in businesses and all that, they deal with it on a daily basis. It's no big deal. You just need to sit down, make a plan, and then implement it. And, I've seen the numbers of Pakistan. I've been working on it. I've been researching it for a long time, and I just don't see any problem. 70-75% of GDP debt it's no problem. You've got countries like 200% of the GDP.
But I'm assuming,
Fiscal Responsibility and Debt Limitation Act, it's another act which actually prohibits the government of Pakistan, the Federation, to borrow more than 60 or 65%. It's not supposed to be 73%. But, it's nothing to be worried about. You just need a plan. You need to have a plan in place and then implement it. There is no plan that I see.
Yeah, but I'm assuming for that you need that political buy-in. You need that, you make sure that all the pieces of the political economy are aligning with each other, especially this disconnect between the provinces and the Federation that you've highlighted as the main core reason as to why we are in this situation of debt trap as we are.
Well, I mean, let me just clarify this. Medium to long term, yes, you need this. But this is something that needs to be fixed immediately, I mean, the remaining, the amount after the Federation disperses its resources to the provinces, the remaining amount that's left, 3/4 of it goes to debt servicing, like you just said.
Absolutely, yes.
So, I mean, this needs to be fixed immediately.
Absolutely. No, I don't think we can afford to further on engage ourselves in this process of debt accumulation because we're already, I think, neck deep into water. Anyhow, moving on, I think we've covered the more holistic landscape, the macro level, but I just wanted to zoom in a little bit and to see, how it is actually impacting the life of the common man. And again, somewhere during last year, our food inflation, like associated with the food basket, according to certain estimates, went as high as 48 or 49%. And now then, this is alarming. Like you don't see that anywhere in the world, barely anywhere, other than countries which are in a very deep economic crisis of hyperinflation. It doesn't happen in a regular country, 48, 49% of food inflation. And because of this, an additional 20 million people in absolute numbers have been pushed below the poverty line in Pakistan. So Pakistan's current people residing in poverty is at 39.4%. And, this has a lot of social implications. Like we're talking about this in numbers, in economic terms, but this is just beyond numbers and figures at 30. It has realistic, real life implications on the life of the people. and more importantly, on the social fabric of the society. In such instances, you see a lot of social crisis brewing. There's this increase in crimes. There's a lot of distress, distrust within the people. It kind of leads to anarchy. How do you see this whole situation manifesting? Because there's nothing been done to address the problem. Do you think it is a real issue and something that the government needs to worry about? And how can they, again, in the short term, do something to put a lid on it or to control it?
Well, 40% poverty is sad, and it shouldn't be that way in a country like Pakistan. But let me just tell you, 40% poverty Pakistan is not the only country in the world that's going through it. After COVID, there's dozens of countries that have this issue. So I think while this is a very, very sad and very big challenge, which shouldn't have been there in the first place, I think political instability is an even bigger problem, because that is the root cause, and it is eventually resulting in this increase in power. I think it can be very quickly addressed through several methods. You've got to get the civil society active. You've got to either get them organized or let them get organized. The problem with the bureaucracy of Pakistan is, the mindset of the people in the government is that they don't do it, and they don't let other people do it either. Mm-hmm. So you've got to mobilize them. You've got to organize and ensure transparency in the DISP program. So, the handouts go to the people who deserve. That's urgent. I'm not a big fan of giving handouts. I feel that imparting of skills is more important. But until we get there, until we're able and capable of imparting skills, I mean, in one of the future programs, we'll talk about skills. You don't want to know what we're doing, where we stand. So until we get there, you've got to actually rely on the ISP and, giving money to the people, but they need to go to the deserving people. While this is happening, agriculture, we need to focus on agriculture. Again, we'll talk about the numbers in the coming programs. It is a no-brainer. You get the results within months. Such fertile land, such amazing seasons. And, although it's severely water-scarce country, but for agriculture, because of the canal network and the dams and the seasons, and, there is ample water for us to be able to, to increase the yield of our crops to double or triple. Immediate results within a few months. You've got to focus on import substitution. Whereas there are 118 elements, I believe, on the periodic table, subject of chemistry. 92 of them exist in Pakistan. Can you believe that? And guess what we do? We have them mined using the ye old donkeys, ye old practices, and we ship them out, and then we end up importing the value-added stuff. Can you believe that? 92 out of 118. Import substitution. Now, I say these things because I've come across studies that were done in 1950s on certain elements. Nothing was done since then. Now, I say that because I talk to businessmen, I talk to industrialists, I meet with them, I explore things with them, and I know for a fact that given a chance, they would love to develop these industries, because you see, an entrepreneur sees the opportunity, and for an entrepreneur, it's a no-brainer.
Absolutely. I think that is the way for development, because even right now, you look at globally or any developed country, 9 out of 10 jobs are being created by the private sector. And I think this is what we'll touch upon in our next episode as to why.
I wanted to also touch upon IT. Again, low-hanging fruit. We must focus on that as well. So, these there are ways, remittances, and I'm very happy that the government is working on it. And had record, we had $3 billion remittances in August compared to $2 billion previous August. And we can talk about it in future programs.
Perfect. No, I think it was a great initiation to a series. And there's a lot that we need to unpack and a lot that you've highlighted in this program as well, which we would, go into much more detail in the next programs. And I think one would be as to why the private sector has been unable to really harness its potential, and why hasn't been, we have not been able to establish the kind of industries that should have been established in Pakistan. So on that note, I would like to thank you for your time today, and we look forward to having you again.